So welcome to the first episode of the Offseason Podcast. I've got sisters in company, Elisabeth and Michaela. Um, let's start with Michaela first, if that's okay. Just kind of give some background of who you are and what you're doing with the offseason, and then Elisabeth.
Okay, so I'm Michaela. I am working kind of as like a mental health consultant, I guess you could say. I have my undergraduate degree in psychology and a master's in clinical mental health counseling, and I'm currently working on a doctorate in sports and performance psychology. So I'm just helping Bryce out with kind of like the mental health perspective of everything that we're trying to do with these young athletes. So I'm here basically for any knowledge that he needs for mental health and treating athletes and all of that.
Nice.
And I would just be the guest speaker of who is the young athlete. My name is Elisabeth Brooks. I'm currently enrolled in college. I'm a senior, about to get my degree in speech and language pathology. I love kids. I want to work with the pediatrics one day, but I'm just here to give you insight onto what my athletic journey was like and just talk with y'all and hopefully give some insight.
Mhm. Perfect. Yeah, I think we should definitely kind of jump into the story between you two because it sounds to me like Michaela's reasoning and purpose for what she's doing kind of comes from your story, Elisabeth. So I'll let you start there with your story, and then Elisabeth can kind of jump into how she's been handling it all.
Okay. So I knew I wanted to do counseling. Um, but for those of you who don't know, there's lots of different specialty areas in counseling, which I didn't really find out until a couple years ago when I started my master's degree. So I was kind of just exploring that. And during that time, Elisabeth was kind of starting her college journey, and she played soccer all throughout elementary, middle, high school. Um, that was like her thing. Everyone knew like Elisabeth, soccer. That's what she does. Breathes it, lives it. Um, and when she started college, she got a scholarship her freshman year to play at a private school here in Georgia. And during that time, which I'm sure like she can tell you a little bit more about, um, mental health just kind of like took a turn. And I just kind of watched her kind of like fall out of love with the sport, I guess. And Liz, you can correct me like if it's different, but um, I just kind of saw the toll that mental health took on her and how it affected her, not only off the field, but on the field as well. Just watching her play games, like she wasn't as like excited like it used to be. Like you could hear her, she played in goal and you could hear her like yelling and screaming, cheering on her teammates. And I just noticed kind of towards the end, it was a little more reserved. So I saw like the effect that her mental health had on her sport and her enjoyment of the sport. So that's when I started looking into like the sports side of mental health, because I don't think she had very many resources, not very many like where we live outlets or help in that area. So I looked more into sports psychology, and I've always wanted to be a part of sports because I cannot play sports. I'm not athletic, but I love watching them. I love being involved with them. Um, so that's how I kind of found this little specialty area. Just watching her journey and the things that she struggled with, and seeing her not have access to resources that would be really beneficial. And now that I've seen her kind of plug into some of those resources with therapy and support, I've seen that, I guess, kind of like her joy come back with soccer. And I'm sure she'll like tell you about what she's doing now with it more for, for fun and enjoyment. But that's kind of where it started, just watching her journey with that at the beginning of her college career.
So, yeah, I feel like you really hit on most of the high points, but I'll expand a little bit. So, I'm about to start my senior year, so this was back about 2 or 3 years ago when I was first going into college. Like she said, soccer was kind of like my niche. It was my thing. I'd started playing when I was 5 years old, and by the time I was in high school, I was playing year round between like travel ball, high school, indoor, 6v6, all sorts of things. It was just like I loved soccer. It was almost like an outlet for me. And so I was really excited when I got the chance, the scholarship to the college, and I was really looking forward to it. And basically, just slowly being on the team and I guess dealing with a different level of playing and a different style of coaching on top of, being somewhere new. I didn't really know anybody. Um, it was hard, definitely. Wait, is this live or can you cut pieces of this?
I can cut it, yeah.
Okay, okay. Let me log back in. Let me log back in.
Okay.
Okay. Spec do you want me to give specifics?
Go ahead. Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so I know specifically with this team there were things I guess that really were different for me and that caused me to have kind of some different emotions, like even just little things like for example, like all of our exercises, they were timed. So it was like if you didn't reach your goal by the time the timer was up, it was basically like you're good enough or you're not good enough. So I guess there were just all sorts of like little things that just it made me start feeling like chore was more soccer was more of a chore, whereas before it felt like it was my escape. And it was almost like now I need an escape from soccer. Just like the pressure, the comparison within the team, like comparing yourself. I had never really dealt with that in high school, like feeling the need to compare myself to other players. We'd always had like just a very close bond. And the girls were amazing. They always, they were very encouraging, but it was just like being constant comparison and uh, struggles with like self-worth and those kind of things.
Got it. Yeah. Yeah, I can kind of relate in the soccer side of things. I didn't get to go that far, partly, maybe due to some mental health things that I found out later in life as an adult. I think I had the chance to at least play D2 college, and I was the goalie as well. But yeah, I think what I'm hearing is something that Michaela and I have kind of talked about offline a lot about is the pressure kind of changes a little bit once you get to college. Um, and then something that we've been kind of hitting on um, is this style of coaching and training that kind of doesn't seem to be correct. Um, in the way that they evaluate you as an athlete when the biggest place to evaluate you is in a game, not really in practice. You're there on scholarship and things like that, and so there's a reason you're there. But there's all kinds of things, mental health side and outside of that, that I really want something like off season to work on with communities is like, we have athletes struggling with mental health issues, partly to do with, change, because yeah, you change environments and that can be definitely difficult on someone, but also the staff. The staff is pretty responsible for these kinds of things happening to people like you, and there's not enough accountability for that. So, Michaela, if there's anything that you want to add to that, you and I have talked about that component of things.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a big part of it is the staff, the coaches, coaching team, they set the culture for the team. So if they're hyper focused on the performance aspect, the being the best in training, which all of that's like it's good like for sports, like you want to like strive to improve and to be good, but if the focus is only on that and there's no balance with taking care of the mental health side of things, it's going to result in kind of like what Elisabeth was describing, like just burning out on it. It's going to become more like a chore, something that you're not really enjoying. So I think that's a lot of times the missing component is the coaches and the, I guess, leadership kind of stepping up and bringing that kind of like balance between, yes, we want you to perform well, we want you to be good at what you do, but we want you to be in a good headspace when you do it. And we want to make sure we're doing everything we can to make sure you're in that good headspace.
And Elisabeth, going back into that part, like what do you feel like the staff or anybody in that realm of things could have done differently to maybe keep you in the sport longer?
That's what I was about to mention. I was going to touch on how she had said that there were not really any resources available, and that was completely true. Um, the I will say, the assistant coach, he was very personable. He always told us if there was, anything going on, we could go to him. And I did actually, while I was there, I went to him a few times actually. And I mean, having someone there, to talk to was great, but at the end of the day, he can't exactly, I guess, relate or understand. He's looking, some things that were going on with me. Some of the things were happening, within the team. So to go to him and, expect him to be able to I guess fix everything, or I just knew that wasn't possible. So that's why I was really interested in coming on here today. I love the idea that you guys are doing, because I really think it would have made a world of difference if I had resources and if I felt connected. But all I really had, I feel like, was the assistant coach, and that was it. And while that was good for a while, I don't think it was enough.
I think oh, go ahead.
I think that's something that's very common, at least in some of like the research I've done and just looking at the athletes that I have worked with, is the coaches, like they're very, like they're personable, they say like, we're here for you, but there's kind of like a power imbalance. So there's always going to be that thought in the back of their head is, okay, if I tell my coach that I'm feeling really anxious and I'm struggling with anxiety, is he then going to think I can't perform well? And then is he going to bench me? So there's kind of like that power dynamic where it's like you can't be 100% truthful because you don't know how they're going to take it. And like you said, Liz, like the coaches are kind of looking through this lens of, you're my player, you're my athlete. That's kind of their realm of, I guess, like their realm of expertise. So there might be some imbalance there with, like you said, your coach wanted to help, he was there for you, but there's limits to what everyone can do. And that's why I think having that balance is really important, having the coaches on board to provide that athletic viewpoint, and then the mental health workers and the people providing the resources, the advocates, they're providing a different perspective. So I think that's a really important thing.
And I want to touch on the assistant coach, um, the situation with the assistant coach, because I literally had a conversation with somebody that played overseas basketball, and he was telling me something that's very common is when your head coach doesn't have the type of personality to really connect with your players, the assistant coach is the person that has to take on that. And I kind of find that to be a little bit of like I get that maybe it's like an accepted style amongst coaching, but at the end of the day, you're the head coach and you're responsible for the whole team. And if your players can't come to you and have to go through somebody else who, at the end of the day, is a great, I'm glad that we have great assistant coaches out there that do that. But those assistant coaches are, from what I'm understanding with what you're saying and what this other person was telling me, they're there to kind of be a filter to the head coach. And again, they can filter out these things all they can, but if the head coach can't understand and relate to you on that emotional level, then like why are they the person in charge of this team? Because there's more than likely, you know, more than just you on the team that are struggling with things. And um, I think some of the great coaches that come out we see on the higher levels of things tend to be the ones that are like amongst the players as well, taking on a lot of those conversations. So I just wanted to make that connection because I think it's very interesting that, it's starting to become more and more obvious that this assistant coach thing is there should still be assistant coaches, but they should be doing assistant coaching, not the actual coaching.
Absolutely. I feel like you hit the nail on the head. Our main coach, I mean, he was very nice, he was personable, but he was not approachable in the slightest. Our coaches were actually, they happened to be brothers. So he was the older brother and the assistant coach was the younger. And he was the one who always, made the effort to connect with the players on and off the field. So there was definitely that. I mean, I maybe talked to the head coach 3 or 4 times outside of just him like giving me directions, or inside of practice maybe 3 or 4 times. So absolutely. And I just wanted to be known, like, the players can see it too, because I mean there were multiple conversations I had with many girls talking about how we wish the head coach would be as open and as the assistant coach, because just that feeling of knowing that the person, who really is in charge and over everything is looking out for you, it would have been a nice feeling. But I definitely agree with it seems like sometimes the assistant coach really just takes on the role of doing everything off field, and the head coach kind of takes on the role of, leading the practices and all.
And Michaela, did you come across that in any of your conversations with athletes that you've worked with as well?
I've definitely heard from a couple that I worked with in volleyball that kind of how I was talking about earlier, it can be hard to approach like your head coach because there's that kind of fear of, are they gonna not punish me, but are they gonna make certain decisions on the field because I told them this? And I think that kind of comes back to what Elisabeth said. A lot of times it feels like the head coach is in charge with things on the field, and the assistant coach kind of takes the lead off the field, like the personal, like being involved with the players. So I definitely have heard that. I've worked with a couple athletes where, they were like, you can tell my assistant coach like what is going on, but if we don't have to tell the head coach, I'm not going to be upset about that. So
And
I definitely kind of seen that pattern as well.
and you and I have talked about how sometimes it can be so difficult to have these group conversations amongst the athletes together. And I don't see any team world where the assistant coach calls that group meeting and all the players show up. It's got to be, again, the head coach that has to make that call for the entire team to show up and maybe have discussions like this all together, or with a professional involved as well. Um, it's I get the idea, and I get that I'm gonna say that like it's very traditional. It's a very traditional mindset in sports that the head coach has to have I take that back. It's the coach definitely needs to have a grip on the team, because if they don't, yes, there are cases where the team can override the coach quite a bit and it gets very dysfunctional. But I still don't see why some coaches see that connection with their players as um, a situation where they're going to lose control of the locker room. Um, and I think it could be just a traditional thing that it's over the years, it's just become kind of monotonous as a concept in coaching. But no, I personally just would like to see coaches kind of take responsibility a little bit more on that side of stuff. So cool. Yeah, I'm really glad we're hitting on some things that are uh pretty obvious in the team culture of things. Um I'm curious, Elisabeth, how did everything kind of affect you outside of sports? Because I know it took you you removed you from sports. But did it kind of affect you outside of sports as well?
Yeah, so like I was saying earlier, soccer essentially it kind of was like my outlet. For my whole life, I loved exercising. I would work out with my dad. I'd just, kick the ball around in the backyard, whatever. It was just a way to almost like to just stop thinking about everything that I had going on and just it was just soccer. But when I was playing in college, it just it became more like I needed an escape from soccer, between, like, the practices where I was just, like I guess it just overall affected my view of myself, especially between, like, when you're constantly comparing yourself to other girls, like, when you're over exercising, just, I mean, that too, like, physically, I was just exerting, like, way too much energy. We would have, either 2 practices or a practice and a workout, and then on top of that, I was still doing stuff because, I had this in my mind that here is good enough and here is not good enough, and, I'm still not there yet. So, I guess overall, it kinda just the way I viewed myself really kinda took a hit a little bit, and then also, I would say just, like, not even just in myself, but losing a little bit of confidence, just in the things I do in general because for so long, soccer had been my thing and, I enjoyed it, I was good at it, I played a lot, and now it was like all of a sudden, okay, like my thing suddenly doesn't feel like my thing anymore. So if, I can lose this, like almost like what else could I lose or what else am I do I feel sure about that I really shouldn't because, you know, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, Michaela, do you want to elaborate on what she's talking about with some of the conversations you've had with other athletes?
Yes, so kind of how she was saying, comparison is probably, I'd say, one of the top three things I've come across. It's 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 one of those things that, being in sports, especially if you're at a higher level, there's a healthy level of comparison. You use like your teammates to push you to do better, but whenever it kind of crosses that line to where the comparison is detrimental and the comparison is causing the kind of things that Elisabeth was describing, that's where we kind of have to say, okay, like where did we cross the line? Like what's different? Which it all comes back to, I think you'll hear me say this a lot, Bryce, like the balance between things. Um, because when you have that balance of healthy comparison, healthy competition, it's going to foster the person to work hard, be better, but also it's going to foster that team culture, that team confidence out of, I'm not looking at you because I want to be better than you. I'm looking at you because I want us to move forward together. I want us to improve together. And I think that team culture is really, really important. And just to connect it back to what we were saying earlier, that starts with the head coach because the head coach is who sets that culture. So I definitely think the comparison that's one of the biggest things I've seen, if not the biggest. I'd say the only other thing probably would be performance anxiety, but it is very, very often the comparison that the athletes struggle with.
Now, Elizabeth, to Michaela's point, um, I can see, and I'm always the person that's taking everything that we're doing and finding the counter argument amongst people who, again, might be these coaches that we're talking about or be very traditional in sports, but I think somebody on the outside looking in thinks, well, this comparison thing, she's just, she's not being competitive enough or she's not trying hard enough. Um, Before I get Michaela's perspective, I think Elisabeth's perspective, I'd like to kind of hear that from you being somebody who actually deals with it compared to these people out there that would maybe have no experience in doing this kind of thing. What would you say to somebody who's saying that you weren't really competing hard enough or trying hard enough?
Um, I've never had someone, say something like that to me, so I'd have to think. Um, I know for one, just hearing it not makes me angry, but it's I guess I would just want them to understand maybe the things that are going on in my mind, and let them know that this isn't just like a comparison while we're on necessarily. When you start comparing yourself to people, whether even if it just be like within soccer, you find yourself start doing it more and more to a point where it almost becomes like overwhelming. So for someone to say, oh well, you're just not trying hard enough. Well, I mean, I'm doing my best, and I'm still being compared to someone. I'm being compared to someone's best when I feel like, maybe you should look at my best. If I'm doing my best, that's all I can give. So if you're telling me that's, not good enough, I guess once again, like just the self-confidence, it really, I mean, it affects you like in multiple aspects. So I guess I wish there was a way to explain that to people. And I guess really that's all you can do is you can talk to and explain it to them. But it's not, I'm competitive. I mean, you can ask anybody. I am probably one of the most competitive people on this planet. But when being competitive and comparing yourself to someone, I feel like are two completely different things. I like winning. I want to be a winner, but I don't want to win at the expense of my mental health. If I'm constantly comparing myself and trying to be like someone else, then that's not my best, if that makes sense.
No, it does. And I think I I say people say that because I've been in stadiums during games, not as an athlete, of course, but as a photographer or something else, and to hear thousands of people yelling at these athletes that they suck or they're being expletives or things like that. Um, I'm sure there are a small portion of athletes that can really like ignore that. But I'm sure there's a majority of athletes that hear things like that constantly that are just like um very overwhelmed, like you're saying. And I think something that we keep hitting on is comparison and competitiveness, which is pretty interesting because it really feels like there's like some sort of like link between those two. Um, I'm curious too, Michaela, have you ever talked to people outside of the sports by chance? Like outside of these sports that with the athletes that you cover?
Um, like people who've dealt with comparison and like competitive, not in the sports setting.
Well, more so like well, I guess it wouldn't be super conducive for like that so like the study part, the studying the athletes themselves, and then going outside and talking to the people that some of these athletes feel like. Have you ever talked to like people like parents and things like that of athletes?
So I haven't really done a lot of research within like the outside support systems. usually I focus a lot on like the coaching staff, the support staff, but I think that talking with the outside support system would provide such great like insight, because like I was saying earlier, like the coaches, the sports staff, they're looking through this like one specific lens of sport and performance. But whenever you talk to maybe the parent, and I guess technically like I've talked to my parents like whenever Elisabeth was going through this. So I've done it kind of on like not the professional side of things, but like the personal side. And the athletes support system outside of coaches and coaching staff, they're going to pick up on things that the staff may not. So like for example, how I was saying earlier, I could notice Elisabeth towards like her last games, she wasn't like as enthusiastic in the goal. When I say you could hear her like yelling and screaming and giving directions and encouraging from across the field, you could. That was just her, that was her thing. Like, and her team looked up to her for that. And then whenever this kind of decline started, she wasn't doing that as much. And, the coaches might not have picked up on that because that's part of Elisabeth's personality. She's a good leader, but she does it in a way that is encouraging. So the coaches might not have picked up on that, but as her sister, as someone who's known her whole life, like I know that's her personality. So I picked up on that, like, okay, that's something that's different. So I think that outside support systems would play a really vital role in understanding the athlete and looking at them in a holistic way. And Bryce, you'll hear me say that word a lot, but just looking at them as a whole person, not just as an athlete, and picking up on those, I call them like the warning signs that something is off. So obviously like a sports warning sign might be, okay, they're limping, or they're not running as fast, or their pitch isn't as good anymore. But you have to look out for those kind of like mental warning signs as well. So changes in like the personality, or like decrease like mood. So I think you can get a lot of that from the outside support system, because they're looking through that lens of, okay, this isn't just an athlete, this is my child, or this is my best friend. Like this is a whole person. So I definitely think talking with the outside support system would be really, really important.
Mm-hmm. Elisabeth, what was that like? What was the support system like from your perspective, from like your parents?
Oh, I have an amazing support system at home. My parents never missed a game. They just made it known that they wanted to be there. They enjoyed watching me do what I loved. So that was amazing. And even on the inside, like the girls on the team they were very kind. They were encouraging each other. I think kind of like y'all were saying earlier, the tone is kind of set by like the head coach. And so honestly, the people around me, they were speaking life into me. It wasn't like we were bullying each other. I had, my parents, and I still had my I had my new team, and then I still had friends and stuff. So I had, tons of people who were there supporting me and, telling me how good I was. But it's kind of like when I was at practice, it was just like comparison, like I'm not good enough. So I think what you guys were saying about the tone kind of being set by the head coach, even if you do have like a great support system like I did, I feel like it can still take a toll on you, because I had my parents, my family, I had kind teammates, and I was still struggling with these feelings of not being good enough, and these feelings of anxiety and stuff. So I think if you can have the best support system out there, and if you're still, you know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's interesting. Um, you're so used to seeing trainers run out on the field when a player hurts themselves, and it'd be really, really interesting to kind of see, almost like, because I'm not too familiar with like the sports psychology part of teams, like uh their roles, but it'd be interesting to see them being out there on the field or court or wherever the athletes are, watching them from a different perspective. Maybe gathering some more information from people like parents and friends to kind of get a better baseline of like personality so that when something is happening in the moment or in practice, like they can pull them aside and say and talk to them and almost like do what the trainer does, but from the mental side. Because I again speaking from being a former athlete in high school and things like that, that would have been kind of helpful in certain situations. But I think there is this element that uh, there is an element in sports that still says the athlete's responsible for that. The athlete's responsible for picking themselves up. You should have the motivational speech that we gave in the locker room and things like that should have been enough to pump you up enough to get past whatever it is. And those motivational speeches work, but they're like a 5 hour energy. They're not like, energy that lasts all day long. Um, but what's it been like seeing Michaela kind of going in this direction with her career based on kind of like what you've gone through?
Honestly, I mean, it's amazing. Like, I could not be more proud of her. I look up to her, the things she's doing. I mean, she's an amazing role model. And honestly, it means a lot that she cares, she could see that this was affecting me. And, she wanted to make a change and she wanted to help people so they didn't have to go through this alone. And I mean, I really can't even put into words like I just think she's amazing. I'm very proud of her, and it means a lot because, like she was saying, I really feel like, maybe if I had more resources or more people, that could have helped me specifically with my mental health, like, I really do think it could have played a different or made a difference, and, like she said, now I'm starting back to enjoy it, I'm back working out, and, I've been, talking about the idea with my dad, playing adult summer league, so, I love, the feeling now of, kinda, like, being able to get back into that, and so, knowing that she's trying to help, other young athletes, find their joy again, like I've found mine is I guess it's just really nice.
That's awesome. Yeah, it was. I loved when I first heard that Michaela got into everything she's been doing because of your background and your story. That's definitely had to make sure that when we talked that she was in here because that was gotta hear it from Michaela too. But I do want to because part of the off season, you'd say pillar system. I don't even know what to call it right now since we're so early, but we definitely hit on the mental health side because that's pretty much the foundation of everything. As much as people don't want it to be because it's so difficult, it can't be that. It can't be this thing that just because it's so difficult, we have to set it aside. But talking through the mental health side of things, talking about you going into speech pathology, like tell me a little bit about why you're choosing like speech pathology and like what career you're kind of seeing for yourself.
So I actually was in speech therapy when I was younger, and I always knew, I wanted to work with kids, so I knew I wanted to do something that helped them, and I am a substitute teacher, and that let me know really quick that I did not want to go into teaching. I love subbing. I love teachers, but I could not do what they do. And I just remember, honestly, kind of the stuff that I did in speech. If you've never been to speech therapy before, it's basically like you play games with your kids to help them learn how to pronounce things if you're working in a school setting, of course. But I just would like to be able to help kids the way that I was helped when I was younger. I know public speaking. When I was in like middle school, I was very nervous to like get up in front of groups because I had really kind of just overcame that that speech impediment, and I was finally able to, I guess, speak correctly or without any errors. And I just feel like I grew a lot of confidence in myself after I stopped making those errors. And I guess I would just like to, give that back to kids who are struggling and just make it fun. I love having fun, and I think when when things are fun for kids, they catch on faster, and that is one of the great things about speech therapy is they love using games to help teach their lessons. So I think that is a perfect job for me, honestly.
What do you see yourself doing and taking that career into, 5-10 years?
Um, I would like to. I've been thinking about working at a school system. I know there are many places you can work. A lot of people um, aren't too familiar, but really anywhere, the VA, the hospital, you can work with elderly patients, you can work with adults, you can work with kids, you can work in a hospital with newborn babies. But I think for now, I've been in the school system and I'm really enjoying that, being in the school setting. So I think I would like to maybe in one, well, I say I'm a senior, but I have to get my master's. So even though I will be getting a degree, I'll have 2 more years. So hopefully in 5 years, I will be settled down in a school with about 2 years of experience under my belt. Um, and after that, I would like to maybe look into working elsewhere, like maybe at a hospital or something, but we'll have to see about that.
But Michaela, for you, like where are you seeing, because you're working on your PhD right now, like where do you see yourself going in let's say the same time frame?
So I have about, let's see, I think a year and a half left, maybe 2 years for my doctorate. So, kind of short term goals right now. Like I said earlier, I'm working as a full time clinical therapist at a community mental health center. So, I currently have my associate license. So, whenever you pass your test after getting your master's, you have to work as associate licensed for 2 years and you have to do supervision, um, gain like clinical hours. So after those 2 years, I will get my full licensure. So it'll kind of, the timeline will really match up really well because as I'm finishing up my clinical experience to get my full licensure, I'll also be finishing up my doctorate. So the timeline worked really well on that. Um, so I've gone kind of back and forth. I know that I want to work with athletes. I've never been really picky on the setting. Um, I think a lot of people, of course, would like want to go big or go home and say, oh, like I want to work only with professional athletes. And, it would be really cool to work with professional athletes. But I think a lot of times, like the younger athletes get looked over. And Bryce, one of the things that you said to me the first time we talked that really stood out was, that's where it starts. Like this mindset starts when you're young. So if you can instill this kind of like understanding that mental health is important into the athletes when they're young, middle, high school, even like early college, that's going to make a difference. So I don't really have a preference. I do know that I want to live in a bigger city. Um, so I'm looking probably most likely in Atlanta. I know I want to be somewhere in Atlanta working with either young athletes or professional athletes. But I don't really have a specific preference. I don't want to kind of like tie myself down to a specific thing just because, I want to be able to explore it. But I know like I want to work with athletes, bridging the gap between mental health and sports. And that's a very kind of like narrow niche because for a lot of people is you focus on one or the other. So the clinical side of things, you only focus on the mental health. And then, the performance consultants, they only focus on the performance. So I want to kind of bridge that gap and work with people, showing them how your mental health is interconnected with your physical health, and your physical health determines your performance, and it all kind of circles back to your mental health, and it's all very much connected. I feel like I have a very much kind of like holistic perspective. I like to see the connection between different things. So I guess the short answer to what you're saying is anywhere that I can do that.
Gotcha. Well, I definitely hope that we get off season to a place where you can definitely do that more often. To your point with the professional athletes, it's anybody in any industry kind of looks at the professional side of athletes or professional sports as like the pinnacle of like where to be. And like I was definitely one of those people in the beginning of my career, but I definitely see where that's unfortunately where a lot of the focus ends up going, like especially a lot of the best people in each of their fields go. It's just because that's where you'd think the most impact is going to be had. But in the real world, unfortunately, it's when on the mental health side of things, and there's actually quite a few things like career, like we've talked about, fitness, a lot of those things are kind of established in pro sports. A lot of things in general are just established in pro sports. So the room for change is very, very difficult at that point. And you have to really embed yourself almost on the individual level with athletes at that point to get any kind of shift to happen. But I personally now like seeing everything and talking with you about all this stuff, like I really want to get more involved with middle school, high school level, because again, yeah, you're right. That's where it all starts. Like they're just not fully prepared and aware of like what's coming when people give you like so much attention, or people expect so much out of you when, Elisabeth, like to you, like you put so much pressure on yourself in a way with how things were going on the field, that your counterparts in class don't have those same pressures and standards to live up to every day. Which is where, again, where the narrative kind of gets weird, because those people look at you as having, like your scholarship and everything like taken care of, like you should be okay. When in reality, like, no, like you're going into college very young with so much pressure on you to succeed compared to most, that you're more than likely going to burn out quicker than everybody else is going to in that situation. So just really shifting the narrative around when it comes to athletes, so that everybody can just have a better relationship, and then we can hopefully take athletics to just like a whole other level, maybe even performance wise, but just as people, we bring up the word well-being. Like well-being is kind of like that outside of performance part that we really want to make sure we're touching on, because that's the thing that's being neglected right now. So thank you both for being on. I appreciate you both for being open and transparent about everything. And Elisabeth, good luck on everything you've got going on in school and in life. I really hope you do, find some enjoyment, at least playing soccer recreationally, because I still need to do it too. I need to find some rec soccer to play in. I've been around sports too much to not be playing again myself. And thank you, Michaela, for all the things you've been doing, and really looking forward to seeing how we can work together more and more on this stuff. So y'all have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you.